Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. I wake to the roof ticking from cool to warm. The hangar ribs take shape above the cot. Burke lifts his head when I sit up. I rub the ridge in his paw where metal once lodged and feel the hard scar tissue under the pad. He watches while I lace boots and stand. The air smells dry and clean. Morning feels workable. I count first. Battery bank shows 76% on the faceplate. No fault code. I swipe dust from the vents with an old shirt and write the number on the card over the inverter. The little tug generator sits in the corner with the fuel valve closed and the cord tied off. I keep it for fabrication or medical only. Last time I ran a generator during an outbreak surge, I learned what loud machinery invites. I write no runtime and move on. Water comes next. Both totes took last night's drizzle. First flush cap seated, no grit on the filter screen. I draw a clear quart, check for floaters, add 8 drops of chlorine per gallon to the fresh top-off, and shake the barrel twice. I mark 6:30 on the lid and log it. The pond behind the berm still holds, but I treat it as emergency source. When I ran without chlorine for 3 days on the road, it cost me a week of cramps and a lesson I do not forget. I note a pond pull at dusk only if heat spikes. This place earns the attention because every choice before it stole time and blood. When the old shop fell, it happened faster than the numbers suggested. Traps worked until the first mutant pushed in and jammed my rhythm. The growth plates on the face and shins soaked small rounds, and the second one leaped the choke just as the third group piled the fence. I had staged 3 go bags under the counter for months, each with food, medical, filter, and a stripped kit for the rifle and pistol. I pulled them, loaded what I could carry, and cut the chain on the back door with a bolt cutter I kept by the mop sink. Burke tried to run on a bad paw after the grenade trap sent shards across the ground. I lifted him, threw the strap over my shoulder, and walked the alley I had measured 3 times when the city was still half functioning. I made the boat because the river route stayed empty after dark. I pushed off, braced my feet against the keel, and drifted with the current until the city noise turned thin. After that, there was no base, just segments. The first segment was an overpass where I slept under concrete and counted trucks that would never move. I learned to cook on fuel tabs and eat from cans cold when smoke drew attention. The next segment was a drained irrigation ditch that carried me around 2 suburbs without ever touching a road. I built a paw boot for Burke from a wetsuit glove I found snagged on a fence and tied it with line from a broken weed trimmer. A week later, we hid in a grain elevator's loading room when a pack of raiders swept the county store next door. They took every loud thing and left the parts that fix quiet things. I took those. The sedan carried us until a radiator seam cracked and steamed out at a grade crossing. I pulled the battery and tools and left the rest to rust. The minivan I found ran on borrowed time and died with a head gasket failure 2 towns later. I pushed gear on a dolly for 3 days until I found a rolling frame I could turn into a sidecar. I welded the mount using 2 car batteries, jumper cables, and a rod. The welds were ugly, but they held. When fuel got thin, I switched to slow routes and gravity where I could. I slept in a church basement that smelled of wet carpet, a locker room at a municipal pool, and a maintenance bay behind a stadium. None of those made sense for a home. I started looking for open ground that did not invite people. I stayed off highways and used county maps to mark clear vistas and structures with their own anchor points. I crossed one hill at noon and saw a torn windsock and a field of cracked asphalt through the heat shimmer. That was enough reason to check. Small airfields draw less traffic. They have line of sight in every direction, solid steel in the doors, gutters that catch water, and hardware I can turn into traps without making noise. When I pushed the hangar door for the first time, the tracks were dry, and the lock was broken in a way that told me no one closed it after the last storm. There were no fresh footprints. I slept inside that night with the door blocked and the sidecar against the man door. I stayed because the layout matched how I survive. I use funnels and backstops. Runways give both. I need anchor points for nets and posts that do not tip when hit. Hangars are ribs and braces already built. I need a roof that holds solar rails and sheds water into totes without a full redesign. The gutters were intact. I need distance so I can move before contact. The apron gives me that. The last thing I need is a place far enough from neighborhoods that curious people do not wander in with bright clothing and loud ideas. This strip sits off a county road with a blind turn that encourages drivers to miss it. Perfect. I do not owe this place my life. I built it to return what I feed into it. The batteries come from forklifts I stripped at an old distribution center that lost power long before we got there. The panels came off a collapsed office park where no one had the trucks to carry them away. The first nets were cargo webbing cut from a wrecked box truck. The H-stakes began as cut rebar from an abandoned foundation pour. Every piece speaks to a failure I turned into a tool. That is the only kind of history worth keeping now. Burke is the reason mornings stay ordered. In the first months after we left the river, he refused to sleep if I slept. He would pace and chuff at every branch scratch and empty can. He learned the door discipline because I made him learn it. Sit at the threshold until I touch steel. Move only on the hand signal. No barking unless I say so. He obeys because the work makes sense to him, and because I never once opened a door when I did not mean it. So I stay here because corridors of shade push the infected past the fence line in patterns I can read, because the steel in these doors takes a beating without flex, because the roof holds my panels and my rain, and because this field lets me work the problem before it reaches the hinge. I did not pick it for comfort or nostalgia. I picked it because everything that failed before taught me what a place has to be. I count batteries, I keep water honest, I leave the generator quiet, and I write it all down so I cannot lie to myself later. That is how I keep the day from breaking. That is why I am still here. I walk the flight line with Burke at heel. The apron is cracked and full of weeds in the seams. The runway numbers at the end of the strip are faded but readable. The windsock rotted off last year, so a strip of orange cloth hangs from a length of wire tied to the old light post. It drifts left barely. I keep the sidearm under my jacket and the carbine slung tight under the chest. The suppressor adds weight and makes the swing different. My hands know it now. Outer perimeter looks good. Rebar stakes shoulder height hold welded mesh that sits low, not pretty. Spike mats lie under the gravel, hidden from drivers who think all ground is safe. The funnel lanes I built from pallets and wing spars sit where the apron meets the taxiway. Each lane forces a left turn, then a right. You cannot keep speed through it unless you want to flip. Cones painted onto the cracked asphalt mark, where the eyes should land for clean shots, and where the shots should never go. Behind those cones I know my backstops. Berm, cement wall, or the empty field. If it is sky or the far highway, I let it walk until the angle changes. Burke trots to the north end and stops. I stop too. He noses the fence near the low spot where water collects after hard rain. Nothing new. He sits. I tap the post twice. Move on. He does. Back inside, I check the hanging red lamps and the little runway edge light rig I wired for visual cues. I only use them as markers, never for show. Red for move, blue for hold, green for reset. It is basic, and it works. I test the switch for 5 seconds. Burke glances at me, and then at the door. He expects the walk now. I give him an old piece of dried meat from the tin and tell him we will go in an hour. I eat oats and powdered milk. Add 2 spoonfuls of chili spice to fake a good morning. I note the time. I rinse the cup and set it upside down on the same spot I always use on the bench. Tiny routines make the big ones faster. The motorcycle sits in the maintenance bay, sidecar nose pointed toward the Sally. The sidecar has a mesh shield I can tilt down for rain or up for open air. The dog sling sits folded under the seat. Stitching looks good. The panniers carry basics. Med roll, spare tube, chain lube, plug kit, tarp, 2 quarts of water, and 2 magazines for the carbine. I check the engine oil by feel because the sight glass lies. I top off half a cup from a can I found in a forecourt last winter. I kick the tire with my heel. Hard enough. I spin the chain slowly and check for coins and nails left as a joke by the world. Clean. I take the sidecar tarp off and set it on the peg where it always hangs. The hand pump at the hangar door works after last week's fix. The seal still drips once per stroke, and that gets on my nerves in a way that means I should replace it soon. I make a note. Scrounge a proper gasket from the brake bin at the small town garage. If it is gone, I will cut one from tire sidewall. We leave the hangar at 8:10. I close the big door behind us and lower the brace bars into their floor cups. The man door clicks twice when I turn the key. The Sally has 2 gates. I open one and lock it behind us. Then I open the second and lock that too when we are through. I like hearing the voiced clicks. That means things stayed on track. The strip between the trees and the road looks empty. I push the motorcycle along at a slow roll until we hit the far taxi lane. I keep speed low to spare the chain and ride the grass when it is smoother than cracked pavement. Burke leans into the turns and looks ahead. He learned to stay down if I tap the sidecar twice. He learned to sit up if I tap once. He learned to curl small if I tap the floor with the toe of my boot. We practiced it for weeks on back roads where nothing moved. I head east toward a little diner and the pump garage where I found the motorcycle. Past that, a 1-lane bridge crosses a narrow river that dries to a trickle most of the year. The diner has a sign that still says breakfast all day in flaking white paint. The forecourt has a rack of expired inspection stickers in a dusty window. The garage door is stuck half open. I killed a pair of Walking Dead in there the first week I camped at the place. I remember their clothes, but not the faces. I changed the oil, fixed the chain, replaced the handlebar, and stayed 13 days. The quiet got too big and pushed me out. At the diner, I park out back where the view is narrow. I walk in slow with the rifle slung and the pistol under a shirt. The refrigerator cases in the kitchen still hold loops of busted seals. I check the pantry I stripped ages ago and only find a nest of dead wasps. I leave the door wide so the smell moves out, and I prop a brick to hold it. In the garage bay, I hunt the pile of tire offcuts and cut a circle with my knife for the pump gasket. It is not perfect, but it is better than the drip. We move on through the short row of houses. One porch holds a chair with a broken rung. A pile of clothing sits by the step where someone decided weight was worth more than nostalgia. I do not touch any of it. I take the short hill behind the school and head for the tree line. My plan is to check the nest by the culvert that Riley marked last week after a wind shift. I watch wind these days. Shade draws, heat pushes, and the Walking Dead drift along those lines, just like trash on a small river. I pretend it is predictable, and it mostly is. At the tree line, I stop the motorcycle and push it into brush so the mirror does not catch sun. Burke jumps out on command and sits. The culvert lies 10 minutes north down a deer path that runs parallel to the stream. I hear nothing, and then something. Like branches snapped slow. I crouch and hold a palm out. Burke drops low without a sound. I move the rifle up just enough to use the optic. I see shadows. Then a quick shape moving along the bank. Then stillness. The angle is bad. I move 10 feet left. The angle is better. I see one man on his knees wrestling with an infected. The infected's arm is stuck in a loop of cable. The man has a machete. He is breathing hard and says something to himself that I cannot hear. The infected snaps and does not stop. I take the shot from 15 yards. The suppressed crack is small. The head snaps back. The body drops into water, so I step forward to confirm. I check the man's hands. No extra motion. No second attacker. I say one word, stop. He freezes like I slapped him. He holds both hands out and lets the machete fall. He looks at the water, then at me. "Thank you," he says. His voice sounds like he has been alone a long time. Not desperate, just used up. He points at a small pile under a tarp. "We have meat. Not much. Take some. Please." His hands shake a little, and that might be exhaustion or some kind of shock. The cable loop he used looks like a catch snare from a trap line. He did not set it well. The angle allowed the infected to lean free. He knows it from his face. I nod once. "Move slow," I say. "Step back. Leave the tarp." He nods, steps back, and keeps his eyes on my hands. Smart. I pull the tarp and see a quartered deer leg and a small bag of mushrooms I will not touch. I wrap the meat in a clean cloth and tuck it in my pack. He points downriver. My camp is up, in the trees. We used to have more platforms. Storm took most of it. We still have one. He says we like a flag. He inches toward his machete and then looks at me. Leave that, I say. I will throw it to you. He steps back. I kick the machete to him, and he picks it up with 2 fingers like he is showing respect to a rule. I ask his name. He says Mason. He points at a hidden line in the brush and says Riley and June are up there. He motions like he will call them. I raise the rifle again and shake my head. He closes his mouth and looks like he realized he pressed too fast. I do not share my base, I say. I do not want you to share yours. He nods like it makes sense. He says again, thank you. I say, go. He takes 2 steps back, then 2 more, then vanishes in green. I listen. No one runs. No whispers float down. I back out the way I came with Burke at heel. We walk to the motorcycle. I mount up and we roll. It is not far from the hangar, and I am not in a mood to find out if he has friends who cannot manage simple rules. Back at the hangar, I fix the pump seal and test it 10 times until the drip stops. Water makes everything rust, rot, and grow. I write on the lid, new gasket from tire, do not over-tighten. I set the deer meat on a rack and wipe salt across it. I will smoke it this evening if the wind stays still. I bring the map out. On it, I keep a clean fold for nests and a clean fold for human sighting notes. I put a small mark for Mason and a line for direction. I write a time, a line that says 1 person, fair talk, basic sense. I do not write trust. I sit on the hangar threshold and watch the runway. Burke lies flat in the shade and twitches his nose. In the distance, the air shivers over the tarmac. Buzzing comes from the grass. I sip water and chew a little of the jerky that is more salt than meat. It does what it needs to do. On the second morning after, I set out early. I ride the sidecar rig down the East Service Road, out past the fire-damaged line where the trees thin, and cut southwest into the Basin Trail. I know where to look. I take it slow. I check every rise before I cross. It takes 2 hours to loop to the glade where I saw him. I bring no rifle raised. I wear the chest radio and carry the backup in the side pouch. I stop before I'm close and let Burke stand first. He gives me a low rumble, not the danger one, just alert. I step off the rig and walk the last part with my hands open. Mason sees me first. He stands slow, not fast. He doesn't grab a weapon. That matters. Behind him are 2 others, a woman and a younger girl. They stay seated on a split log near a pile of coals from a morning fire. The smell of boiled roots still hangs. I do not speak right away. I let them see that I came alone, that I came calm, and that Burke did not lunge. When I talk straight. I say I saw him take a hit for someone else, and that's not common anymore. I say I have a place that's secure but not open. I say I do not invite people in. I assess first. I say if they want a shot at real walls and food that grows, and days without full watches, there's a way. But it's not free, and it's not fast. Mason nods once. The woman June asks what I mean by assess. I tell her exactly. 30 days. Observation. Joint tasks. No secrets. No shortcuts. I run drills. I track behavior. I log every choice. If there's a lie, they leave. If there's a breach, they leave. If they make it 30 days, we talk real plans. Riley, the younger one, asks what happens if someone gets bit. I say that's logged too. I tell her I don't test loyalty by risking lives. I test by watching how people work when no one's talking. They don't argue. They don't ask for exceptions. That's better than any answer. I tell them we move at midday. I lead. They follow. We stay 20 paces apart. Burke rides with me. We don't talk on the trail. They don't ask to. Back at the hangar, I set the entry rules clear. No one comes inside yet. They stay at the outer lean-to. I give them food, clean water, a tarp, and bedding I don't use. I post the job board and run through the basics. I give them chances to show skill, not force. Mason handles a squealing winch with care. Riley builds clean snares with safe triggers. June checks Burke's paw when she sees a limp and dresses it better than I had. After the first day, I hand them whistle codes and flashlight rules. I rotate watch posts with strict shifts. I sleep light. I check every motion on the dome camera. Nothing moves wrong. Nobody tests the fence line or the posted signs. On the third day, June sets out the water count and logs heat index notes without being told. Riley restocks the bolt kits and resets traps. Mason clears a jam in the east gate latch and oil tests the cable pull without complaint. I watch all of it. I log all of it. And I start to write a new line. On the fourth day, a nest goes quiet all at once in the low culvert east of the diner road, and something in the air shifts the way sound travels when weather turns. Riley marks it on her map with an arrow. She shows me, and I overlay it with my old one. The corridor lines match. The infected will move through the trees toward the open runway because the asphalt cools at dusk and the wind runs from river to field. We set the hangar like a machine preparing to spin up. The list gets written in thick black marker: reset nets, repack H-stakes, slugs staged but low, subsonics loaded in bulk, water lined by door, gloves stacked by size, bleach measured on lid. I tape it next to the door so anyone can see what comes next without asking. June prints her own small card: triage order, wound cleaning steps, scraper for growth bits on blades, heat pad if used muscles lock. She is not dramatic. She sets out a chair like this is a day at a clinic. I like people who do not make a show of hard tasks. By evening, the first wave touches the fence. It starts with 5 and becomes 9. Riley counts from the roof in a low voice into the radio. Mason stands by the winch. June sits nearby with the water bottle and the small med roll. I hold port 1 with the suppressed carbine. The turret stays on watch only, not fire, because I want full control. The subsonic rounds push the bolt hard enough to lock back but not enough to beat the springs. I know that feel now, and that means the platform will not surprise me during the work. I run the cadence. 2 shots, wait, 1 shot, wait, rotate to port 2. We use the nets only when a shoulder finds a hole we did not mark. The crowd shifts like rain moving across corrugation. The wedge finds its level. I do not name a single thing out loud. I breathe through my own nose to keep the timing slow. The smell of old clothes and water comes through the gaps. I keep my face neutral and my hands moving. If you add fear to your hands, they forget small motions. I want small motions. At the first sign of a mutated infected, we all feel it. It steps against the cable with the heavy, deliberate motion of something that knows it will not be stopped by a wire. Its head looks wrong. The plates under the skin give it a shape that makes normal angles stupid. Mason grips the winch and waits for my call. I give it. He pulls. The net drops. The creature falls, but not hard. It pushes with both shoulders and spreads its legs wide to distribute weight. It knows ground. I slide the engine stand shield forward, pin a leg with an H-stake, and watch for the head tilt. Riley tosses a small rock underhand to the far side. The head tilts enough to show the gap under the plate at the jaw hinge. I take the shot. It goes out. I nod once, and that is the end of the first test. The second comes faster, heavier. It hits the funnel and moves like a man who was once a runner. It strikes the first door, not with hands, but with hips, then again with both knees. The door groans. Mason swears once, and then grips the cable and pulls the net like he is a winch himself. June flips the red lamp off to shift attention and points her light into the far corner to hold the standard infected. I move to a higher port. The heavy one tries to rise after the net drops. It cannot get its legs under it because the H-stakes do their job. Riley tosses one more rock. The head tilt gives me the angle at the ear line. I take it. It goes out. We reset the net and the door and keep cycling. We drink water. We mark the time. In the middle of it, the radio catches a whisper. It is not for us. It is an AM bleed from a voice calling a mile count and a plea. It says a child's name once. It says a road number and repeats. It could be bait. It could be a recording. It could be someone's last habit. June stares at the radio, and then at me. Mason makes a face that says he wants to chase. Riley shakes her head and points at the ground. We keep working. I write in the margin of the log to leave a water map card under the old road sign tomorrow. No promises beyond that. The push thins after an hour. We clear the last of the ones in the net with deliberate finish shots and drag them to the sled. June logs the bleach poured on the floor and how many gloves went to trash. Mason checks the hinge bolts and replaces one on the weighted door with a fresh set from a bin. Riley rolls the nets and checks each loop for wear. Burke lies next to the stool and watches my face instead of the door. He is learning to watch people now that he knows the fences do work. We sleep in shifts. It is a light sleep that is off and on like poor radio. Burke's ears move every time the wind moves across the ribs. At 3 in the morning, I hear the sound the tree line makes when a group moves through brush. Riley is already on the roof with the scope. She whispers 6, then 8, then quiet. I drink a slow swallow of water and feel it work down. The gate holds. The wedge holds. We wait. Dawn comes clear of fog. We do the drag routine and bleach everything that touched bodies. We scrub the net joints in a bucket and lay them out to dry. I count the rounds used. 7 subsonics, 2 slugs. That is a good count for the number we saw. I put numbers on everything. Numbers keep things from turning into stories that lie. After breakfast, beans and squash, salt and the smallest splash of oil. Mason helps me move a stack of tires to build up the corner wedge. Riley walks a short loop to check her snares and returns with a rabbit we will bone later. June checks Burke's boot again and cuts the nail that started to split. She hums while she works. She writes paw care on the daily board like it is a mission. I let that stand. It is. At noon, we get the second test and it comes ugly. 3 mutated infected hit the funnel within a minute, either because something pushed them or because we sat on a line they already used. I call stations fast and use the voice I learned owning a range. Flat, exact, dry. Mason on winch, Riley bait. June blue light for hold, red for move, count seconds. I drop the first net on time. It pins 2 across the shin. The third misses the net and hits the weighted door with both arms. The slam rattles the brace cup and shifts the hinge a 1/4 inch in its seat. Not failure, but close. I push the engine stand shield into the gap and go knees on hard concrete so I can get my eye into the port. The finish angles are there, but they come and go. A thick plate of growth covers half the eyeline. The jaw hinge opens when it tries to bite the steel. That is the shot. I take it. It flares back and goes still. Mason grunts and resets the cable. Riley throws a stone and the second mutant shifts its head enough for a safe earline. I put that one down. The third thrashes. It catches its foot under the H-stake and rolls its hip to try to rise. June flips a light and the standard infected outside the wedge turn like poor weather vanes. I make the third shot. All 3 go quiet. Mason breathes out the long way and I feel my shoulders drop and come back up again. I do not call it relief. I call it space. We drag and bleach and log. While I am writing, the radio tries to pull my eyes. I let it sit. June looks like she wants me to answer it because that is who she is. Mason looks like he wants to ride out because that is what motion gives him. Riley just looks at the nets and starts stitching a weak loop. She says we should leave a map tile at the old road marker with rules, water and directions. Nothing else. I nod once. That is what I planned. It feels better when someone else says it first. Late afternoon goes quiet except for bugs and the metal ticking as it cools. I walk the perimeter with Mason, and we talk without saying much. He tells me he once spent a week restringing a pulley line for the tree camp and then watched a storm tear it down in an hour. He says he wanted to quit. He did not. He rebuilt. I tell him I used to own a place where people came for range time, and that I spent years telling fools not to point guns at their friends. He laughs in a way that has no humor in it and then stops. He gets it. As dark drops, I do the final sweep and set the turret to watch only for the night. I write on the board, nets before fire, no lights for strangers. I add a small box for slugs used and a box for subsonics. I want to stop guessing and counting on fingers. Numbers lock things down. I lock the man door and feel the clicks. Burke circles and lays with his head on my boot. I look at the cinder block where the tally marks used to be in the shop and then at the new wall where I keep weeks. I lost count last year when every day felt like one long haul. I make a new mark with a carpenter pencil. Month 30-something. Good enough. Morning of the next day is the one where I decide to go lay the map tile. I take the motorcycle with the sidecar and one of the small hand radios with the whisper battery. I pack a printed card that says, water and directions only. No entry. No weapons gifts. If you accept the map, you follow rules. I add a bottle with 2 liters of water and a little bag of jerky that tastes like belt leather. I tell June to hold the place. I tell Mason to check the hinge bolts again. I tell Riley to sit the roof with the bow and to use a rock before an arrow. Burke wants to come, but I make him stay. He watches me leave with the same expression he had when I took the boat 30 months back. The road to the marker is empty. I pass the diner and the garage and the small house with the broken rung. I stop at the mile post where an old road number is carved into a metal plate and a county sticker is half peeled. I put the water under the plate lip with the card on top. I do not look around like a nervous animal. I do not loiter. I ride home. Back at the hangar, nothing moved except dust and a small bird that likes the rafters. June shows me a neat line of herbs she started from cuttings near the drain run. She smiles in a way that is not show. Riley points out a place where the cable rubs the pallet in a way that will cut the fibers if left long enough. Mason has a handful of old bolts and a new plan to seat a hinge deeper into the brace cup. I nod and feel something like a small machine downshift into a rhythm where the gears finally match. The last part of the day is cleanup, prep, and a short fishing run to the retention pond. I take a small rod with a hand reel and stand at the reed edge. 2 casts later, I pull a sunfish and release it. Not worth the fuel. I pull one more, larger, and keep it for the pan. I salt it and lay it on the rack. I set charcoal in the little barrel and watch the smoke rise straight up. That means tonight will be clear and sound will travel. I make a note to keep voices lower than usual. As I sit by the door with Burke and chew a piece of overcooked fish, I picture the gun shop and the second skin we built there. I see the ladder and the strap and the truck that burned when I put a round into the engine bay. I hear the decoy lamp click and the cans rattle on the tripwire and the way a wheel spins when the axle is out. I remember the day the mutants came heavy and ate my time with their growth plates and made every angle into a bad angle. I carried the dog to the boat and left everything else. I did not look back because looking back makes feet stop. Now the hangar stands quiet like a workshop at closing time. Machines put away, floor swept, tools stacked, numbers written, people breathing, a dog at the door. The runway glows faint in the last light, and the trees at the edge hold their bugs and birds. I lock the door and check the hinge and mark down the water used for the day, and the rounds used and the hours slept. Then I write one line on the cinder block next to the new tally, crew of 4 holds. The night brings one more small test. A single figure in a ruined jacket wanders to the fence and tries the mesh with both hands, like a man trying a door he knows will not open. I watch him for a minute. June watches too. She says nothing. We let him be. He turns and walks toward the trees. I mark one more on the count and leave it at that. Not everything needs a shot. Not everything deserves a reason beyond the math of risk. I lie down and close my eyes. I do not dream. I listen to the roof and the little clicks it makes and let the sound teach me the time. This place has a sound now. It is not the angry thrum of a city or the hiss of a hot fence or the pop and laugh of crowds. It is cable spin, bolt turn, water drip, hinge click, dog breath, pencil on cinder block. It is work sounds. Work means this might last. Morning again. I wake to wind from the north. The orange cloth strip swings right. The runway looks like a line that might carry a plane if the world grew brave. We do not need planes. We need tires that do not blow, hinges that do not shear, and hands that do not shake when an earline opens. Today is for checking the radio cache that sits on the far side of the field under the sheet metal with the 3 bolts. I carry a small Yagi antenna in a case and a hand unit that will give me a direction if someone pinged the map tile. I tell Mason he comes with me. Riley covers the roof. June watches water. Burke walks at heel. We cross the field in a low line and move through brush until the little rise that hides the sheet metal from the road. We crouch. I show Mason the 3 bolts and the way to slide the cover without making noise. He does it smooth. Inside sits the radio with the cable and the small battery. I clamp the Yagi to a stake and sweep slow. A faint ping touches the band. It is the same voice as the distress call, but closer now, like someone walked toward the post and read the card, and then did not know how to follow without asking for permission. I shut it down. I will leave a second card with rules so clear a child could follow them. Come alone. No weapons in hand. No ladder. Water at the post only. If you want to talk, talk there. If you do not like the terms, walk on. The airport will not be a market. The airport will not be loud. We get back under an open sky that feels light in a way I have not felt since before the riverboat. Burke lopes at my side. Mason walks without the tight shoulder he had on the first day. Riley waves once from the roof and then points to a spot on the map pinned to the wall. June holds up a jar of cut herbs and a spool of twine. The place looks like itself. It is not safe. Safe is a story word. It is workable. Workable is the word a man should sleep under. I pull the chair to the door and write the day's opening notes. Battery 78%. Water surplus 12 gallons. Rounds used 0. Nets checked. H-stakes reset. Radio cached. Rules in force. Crew status sound. Dog fine. Weather clear. Wind north. I press the pencil down hard on that last line and add a small box beside it to keep tally of the days when the wind favors us. That can be a forecast tool. Add 10 of those and you will know a pattern. As I write, I say this out loud, but quiet enough only the dog might hear it. We can live here. It is not a vow. It is an assessment. I pull the bridge pins and grease them. I lift the weighted door a hair and feel the hinge seats. I drink a cup of water and eat a small strip of meat. I stand and stretch and pick up the engine stand shield and feel its cold weight. I check the rifle and the pistol and the 2 extra magazines. I look at the runway and the trees and the small lodge beyond them that I cannot see but know is there, wrecked, and waiting for weather to finish it. Then I get back to work. I take Mason to the far end, and we mark out a second net position. He cuts 3 new lengths of cord from a spool we found in the maintenance shed, and knots them the way I showed him. No slip under load. We set the cam pulley in a better bracket and tie the release line through a section of PVC so it does not abrade. We test it twice with sandbags, then once with an old flight crate full of scrap to feel the momentum. It drops clean every time. I show Riley how to coil the net and stage it so it will not snag when it falls. She listens with eyes and hands. I like that. I walk June through the bleach mix ratio again, and she nods and hands me a written copy for the lid. 8 drops per gallon for clear, 16 if pond water is used, 30-minute minimum contact time before use, 12 hours preferred. She adds a note to never use the first gallon from a fresh catch. She points to the first flush diverter and taps it. I smile without smiling and mark a check in the margin that says she is the water boss for as long as she wants to be. At midday, the airfield hums in the way a place hums when people are working on separate tasks toward the same end. I hang the engine stand shield on its hook and wipe the handle. Mason seats the hinge bolts with the better anchors and marks each with paint so we can see if any back out later. Riley checks her snares and brings in a small hair. June sterilizes a needle and sutures a minor cut she got on her palm without making a voice of it. Burke naps on the threshold with his paws crossed and his head flat. I nudge his ear and he looks up but does not move. He does not need to. He is home and on duty at the same time. That is the best use of a dog. Late afternoon clouds up and a light rain starts. I lower the hoop house flap and check the drip line. I add 1 more tie to the top run and check for sag. The crate garden needs 3 more bricks along the back to keep soil from washing. I make a note, and Mason stacks the bricks without being told. June moves the herb jars inside and ties the stems so they dry straight. Riley closes the roof hatch and pulls the tarp tight on the gantry. It is a neat string of small moves that means we will not be panicking in 30 minutes. The rain passes. The runway steams a little and then cools. That means movement soon because the walking dead will prefer it to the muddy grass. We pre-stage at our posts but keep our hands off triggers. The rule is we do not shoot unless an angle is good, a leg is trapped, or a door is hit. The last few hours before dark are always when I feel myself lean forward into the work, even if my back is against the wall. It is not dread, it is bracing. You brace for the work you know how to do. 2 ordinary infected hit the funnel first. Easy. I do not engage. They walk through the nets by chance because we have not dropped them. The third is a fast one, not a mutant, a sprinter type. It tests a door and then another. I drop the net when it goes for a turn. The legs tangle. Mason pins the edge. Riley tosses a small rock to set the head. I take the ear angle. It goes still. Reset. Work through steps. Water. Then, the shape that matters shows. It is a mutated infected, and the growth plates run in ridges down the shin. It moves with a half limp that does not slow it in a straight line. It favors impacts with the side of its body like it knows the plates will absorb a hit there. It slams at the door and shakes it. The hinge cups hold. I see the angle when it turns to get a better stance. I drop the door. It pins. It does not pin clean. One arm is free. It scrapes. The sound gets inside my teeth and makes my mouth feel like I bit a strip of aluminum. I plant the engine stand shield and step in. The jawline opens up when it snaps at the metal. I take the shot. It drops and twitches once. I hold for 3 seconds. It stops. That is the part that matters. I do not look away until it stops. Then I step back and log it. I write the time and the tools and how many moves it took and exactly where the angle presented. When I stop writing, it is over. I wipe the shield with bleach and stack it on the hook. Riley rolls the net in tight loops and checks each web joint for frayed strands. Mason reseats a hinge bolt with a dab of thread compound and marks the head with yellow paint so we will see if it turns later. June swaps my gloves for a fresh pair and drops the used ones into the burn can. We reset the door, rack the winch, coil the release line, and pour a slow line of water across the floor seams to push residue toward the drain. It is all small work. Small work keeps panic out of the room. We eat a short meal before midnight. Beans, a little deer meat, a raw tomato split 4 ways with salt. June writes a tiny note on the board about seed-saving order and points to the crate where she has already set a line of paper slips with dates. Riley lays her map open and draws an arrow along the creek corridor that runs from the diner to the culvert, and from the culvert to the airfield edge. She taps twice where the arrow bends. "This is the corridor," she says. "Wind line meets shade line. Tonight we sit in it." Mason leans against the brace and says he will check the cable cup again every hour. He will. That is how he is built. The radio scratches with that same voice that came through last night. It is closer, but still faint. The message repeats a road number and a first name. It uses 2 sentences and a pause, and then says the sentences again. Whoever recorded it knew that simple works. June keeps her eyes on me. I keep my eyes on the funnel and the door. I do not like decisions made with a radio in the hand. I tell her we will place the second card at dawn if the way is clear. She nods, not happy, but not angry. She understands that our line for strangers runs through posted rules first, not voices. The runway cools under a thin cloud cover, and the fence line gets busy in a way that raises the hair along Burke's back. He shifts from doze to alert and sits with his paws just on my boot. 2 ordinary infected drift along the far mesh and wander off. 5 minutes later, 6 come in a group. Then a single fast one overshoots the turn and eats asphalt. We do not move. It is not our moment. Then the first heavy steps come across the pavement, and the air starts carrying that low scrape I have learned to respect. Mutants use the ground like a tool. I set positions without raising my voice. Riley roof, count and bait, Mason winch, door ready. June light strict, water on my shoulder. Burke inside line. I settle at port 1, bring the suppressed carbine to the cheek, and rest the weight on the padded edge. The first mutant enters the funnel like it owns the space. It hits the pallet with a hip, slides, and goes for the gap. I drop the net at shin height. It drops, rolls, tries to rise on the shoulder. The jaw hinge opens and closes like a bad valve. I pin with the shield, wait for the tilt, take the ear line, and finish. Mason holds the door down in case the next one rushes the gap. It does. The second mutant impacts the door, and the hinge cups thunk in. That way hinges do when the world tries to make them new again. The door holds just long enough for me to move to port 2. I do not shoot the face front on. I wait for the head to rotate when it pushes. It rotates. I take the shot. It goes loose and hangs. I call reset, and we move through our marks to bring the rig back to ready. While we reset, a dull thumping starts beyond the tree line, like a group hitting a barrier farther north. Riley calls numbers from the roof. 9, 11, 12 at the fence. 2 heavies in the second rank. She uses a slow count, not breathy, not excited. She gives me time to hear the math. The third mutant has a different way of moving. It keeps its head low and its arms wide. It seems to know nets and doors. It tests the cable with the side of one arm and then with the other. It edges, then feints. I do not drop the net. I wait. It commits to a hop that would clear the first line if we were tired or bored. We are neither. I drop the net when both lower legs are inside the rectangle. It tangles enough for the door to slam and pin at the shoulder. It crushes its own leverage with that move. The ear line shows for a second. That is long enough. It goes still. We hold fire for the next cluster. It is ordinary infected, and a fast one in the rear. Riley tosses a pebble to move the fast one left, and it tangles in the old tire stack I left there for this reason. It thrashes and gives us a clean angle. I do not use the turret. The turret is for movement shaping when we are short on hands. We have hands tonight. 4 of them have jobs and 1 has paws. That is the difference between a plan and a hope. At 2 in the morning, the push pauses. The air tastes like the inside of a workshop after a long day. Ozone from the small battery fan. Oil from the hinge cups. Bleach from the drag routine. I drink half a cup of water and pour a little in my palm for Burke. He licks it and looks at my face, the way he always does when he weighs his world. I pat his ear as we move to reset the net loops. Then the sound I do not like rolls in from the south road. It is a vehicle idling under strain. Whoever is driving feathered the throttle all the way to the edge without waking up to how sound moves on clear nights. Riley gives me a hand sign and points toward the far end, where the access lane meets the county strip. I bring the optic up and see a van creeping behind a line of limp trees. It stops, reverses, creeps again. Whoever is at the wheel is looking for a staging spot. The old world made drivers bold. The new world teaches different lessons. I tell Mason to stand off the winch and put a slug tube within reach. I tell June to keep lights down and her hands free. I tell Riley to count and not shoot unless I say. I step to the inner door and pull the cover off the small launcher case with the 2 rounds I allow into play when vehicles try to use steel as an argument. The first round is smoke for displacement. The second is the disable. The disable is only for when the nose points at the door. I set the smoke on the bench and put the disable into the tube, not chambered, just held ready. I watch. The van noses into the ditch and stops. A figure in a short jacket steps out and looks our way with a slow turn that says he wants to gauge distance. He points, and the van pulls forward 2 feet, then stops again. Another person steps out from the other side and does something with a strap at the bumper. That is a ladder move without the ladder. They want to pull something over. Not on my fence, they do not. I speak into the external speaker on a low volume. Leave the fence and go. The words hang in the clear air. The person with the strap looks up and makes a hand sign I recognize as, "What will you do?" I do not reply. He clips the strap and sets it against the corner post. The other person brings a second strap from the van. I set the launcher on the ledge and line up the angle. I choose smoke first. I put it into the van's open rear, where the strap spool sits. I aim low to avoid a gas tank. I press. The round lobs and hisses and fills the back with a thick cloud. The driver coughs and reverses too fast, bounces the bumper off a stone, and scrapes a panel. The 2 in the ditch abandon the strap and run to the far side where the smoke is thinner. They disappear behind the trees. The van reverses into a rut and rocks. It sits there, idling, blind in its own mess. I set the launcher down and pick up the carbine. A fast infected drawn by the new sound sprints along the access lane and tries to follow the driver door. It cannot get into the van. It slams against the panel and falls. The driver panics and guns it, but the rear wheels spin. The van chews mud and sinks to the axle. I watch. If the nose points our way, I will disable it. If not, I will let it rot in the ditch and teach a lesson for free. The nose points away. The driver jumps out, swears a word I cannot hear, and vanishes into the trees. The van keeps coughing, and then dies. Silence settles back one layer at a time. I set the launcher on safe and put it away. Mason grunts as he lifts the door for a hinge check. June brings me a sip of water. Riley marks the van on her map with a small square and writes dead beside it. The night goes thin after that. The last infected shuffle along the strip and drift toward the culvert. We do not chase. We have a rule about pursuit. Never beyond the posts at night. The wedge worked. Tonight the wedge is the runway itself. It is a long, flat place that pulls movement and gives us angles and backstops that we chose. That is why I left the shop when it became a trap. We need wide ground now. At dawn, I take Mason with me to the milepost where I left the first card. I bring the second card and 2 liters of water and a little packet with a thin bandage, 2 iodine tabs, and a printed note with instructions to a creek mouth that is safe to draw from if you use the filter bag and light chlorine. The note repeats the rules in simple order and says one more line: no ladders, no crowds, no broadcast. I tape the card to the backside of the post where hands can find it, but wind will not rip it. On the way back we pass the diner and hear a noise in the kitchen. I stop the motorcycle and signal Mason to stay back. I step in slow with the rifle at low ready. 2 raccoons bolt from under a shelf and run out through the old pass-through hole. I let them go. I check the pantry for a 3rd time since last winter and find nothing worth carrying. I close the door and stick a wedge in the jamb so it will not swing and slam later. Noise control is not just about gunfire. Back at the hangar, June has the hoop house open and the crates damp. She has a short chart on a scrap of cardboard with dates and temperatures. She points to the warm nights ahead on her chart and tells me mildew might be a problem. She has a mix she wants to try that will not poison the soil. I tell her to run it on one bed and watch. Riley sets 2 new snares under watch near the berm and pins them to the ground with branches so they do not look like traps to people who do not know what they are. Mason stands by the door and scratches his jaw, then says he wants to take the winch apart and polish the shaft before it bakes into a squeal again. I tell him to do it now while the wind is good. While Mason pulls the winch shaft, I walk Burke along the inner line. He pauses by the man door and sniffs the bottom seam. He taps with his paw. I kneel and find a bead of rust around the hinge cup. It is new. I make a note to wire brush it tonight and paint on a coat of oil. Small rot becomes big failures if you indulge it. I learned that long before the world fell. I spin up the little tug generator for 20 minutes to run a drill press pass on a bracket that cracked. I hate the sound. I hate what it calls. But the bracket holds the inner door bar that takes weight from the weighted slab. If that bar fails, the door becomes a liability. I position the generator under a blanket wall and behind the hangar corner and run it only long enough to make the holes clean. When I kill the engine, the rush of quiet feels like a roof falling into place. Midday heat builds and presses down. We work in small bursts and then rest in the shade. June shows me a cut on her forearm where a splinter got loose. It is shallow. She cleans it without comment and tapes it closed. Riley files an arrow notch and replaces a string she had been nursing. Mason laughs when the winch spins like new and then holds his hands up like a mechanic proud of a sound. I slap his shoulder once and he grins. He has been holding a lot of weight for a long time. People like him live in the structure of their work. At 3 in the afternoon, the radio voice comes again, stronger. It is not a trick. It is a man using a low-power set with a clean mic, repeating a message on a loop. It says a first name and a road and a plea. I do not run to it. I finish tightening a bracket and then tell Riley to join me on the roof with the glass. June stands at the door with Burke. Mason takes the winch end and keeps the door pinned. We scan the road marker line. 2 figures stand near the post with their hands out to the sides. No weapons in hand. One is small and is holding something like a bag. The other is tall and wears a bright shirt like a person who has not learned how color looks from across a field. I curse under my breath. I did not think to write no bright colors on the card. That is my mistake. I make a note to add it later. We do not mount up and ride. We do not wave. We watch. The 2 figures set the bag on the ground and step back. After a minute, the tall one steps forward and lays a radio on the bag, then steps back again. He raises his hands. The smaller figure does the same. I lift the binoculars and study faces. They are tired. Their hair is wrong in the way that happens when you do not have water to spare. Their hands shake, but not from a trick. I do not see a third nearby in the brush. I do not see a ladder. I do not see a group hiding a turnaway. I wait 5 minutes. They do not move. I send the hand signal to Mason to keep the door barred. We walk out as a pair, me with the rifle low and Riley with the bow half strung. We take the perimeter path that keeps us on firm ground and off the road. We approach at an angle and stop 20 yards out. The tall one speaks first. He says he saw the card and the rules and is here because his son needs water and he needs directions to the creek mouth. He points to the small figure. The small figure looks older than the word son suggests. The small figure lifts the bag and holds it out like an offering and sets it down again. I ask who recorded the loop. The tall one says he did, on a battery charger that pulls power from a crank. I ask where he sleeps. He points to the old storage lockers at the bus lot and says he knows it is a bad place. But the storms wrecked their last camp and they had no choice. He does not ask for entrance. He has read that part at least. I nod and tell him he can take the water at the post and the directions on the card, and that if he needs more after that, he can come back at sunrise tomorrow and leave a note with a list. I tell him we do not trade weapons and we do not allow entry. He nods and looks down. He understands that my rules are not negotiations. He asks if he can leave the radio in the bag because its battery is shot. He says, maybe I can use parts. I tell him to leave it on the ground and walk away with the water and the card. He does. The small figure watches me and does not ask anything. Good. Questions get people killed in this world when they come early. We retrieve the bag after the pair walk out of sight along the hedgerow. Riley keeps her head down and eyes up like I taught her. She does not chat. The bag holds a radio that is older than I am, stripped of its back, with a battery pack that smells of acid. It is not a trap. It is just a gift from someone who hopes that giving makes a path appear. I take the radio back and set it on June's bench for parts. It will be useful in small ways. A knob here, a spring there, a bracket that can be bent into a switch plate. Nothing goes to waste. Evening moves in with a sky that looks stable. The wind drops. That means sound will paste itself to the ground and travel. I adjust our discipline to match. I set hand signals instead of whispers. I move tools closer to the ports so we do not clatter. I separate the slug box from the subsonic box, so I will not grab wrong in the dark. June writes a short list on the whiteboard. Bleach levels, glove count, bandage rolls, iodine tabs. Riley pins her map with fresh numbers on the 2 active nests and draws a small star on the one that emptied yesterday. Mason checks the door brace cups for hairline lines he might have missed. He finds none and looks relieved in a quiet way. At full dark, the airfield feels like it is holding its breath. I do not write that on the wall. I write this. Sound travels far. Eyes up. Nets before fire. I underline it and step back into the rhythm. Burke walks the interior line once and returns to the door and flops down with his head on his paws pointed at the hinge. If that door moves without a human hand, he will feel it. He is useful in 100 practical ways. I scratch his ear and tell him he is a good employee. He blinks and gives me a small sigh that is not human language but carries the same meaning. The surge begins at 9:10 by the watch. Riley calls 10 at the fence, then 15, then a 20 count. Most are ordinary, moving with the steady lag step of long hunger. 2 are fast and choppy. 1 is heavy. We take our stations and do not shoot yet. The crowd leans on the mesh and slides. The first heavy goes for the pallet gap we left for this exact moment. It hits the edge just as I drop the net. The legs are inside the rectangle and tangle. The door slams. The engine stand shield drops. The earline presents. Shot. Done. Reset. A fast one threads the crowd and gets near the inner funnel. Riley tosses a small stone. It jolts, turns, and trips on a flat piece of tire sidewall we planted. That trap is rude and simple and always works. It stuns the fast ones long enough for one clean angle. It does. I use it. I log the time. We move again. Now the numbers rise. 30 at the outer fence, 2 heavies in the second row. A clump of 6 sticks to the pallet wall like seaweed. I do not shoot into clusters. I hunt angles. I call a door lift to change the shape of the crowd. The door lift changes the pressure line, and the crowd slides 2 feet left. A head pops clean in the port. I use the moment. The crowd flows back to fill the gap. It is like pushing peas on a plate with a fork. I make a note to use that mental picture when I train the others to think about crowd movement. Simple pictures keep panic from lying to your hands. The second heavy hits the door twice. The brace cups sing where steel meets steel. Mason stands on his toes to give the winch the right leverage. The cable hums under load. I can feel it in my teeth the way I feel a lightning hum when a storm line is too close. I drop the shield, wait for the tilt, and finish with the ear angle. June counts seconds and cracks a light into the far corner to pull ordinary infected away from our working spot. It does what we need. Then, 3 heavies arrive as a block. This is the test that matters. You do not outshoot 3 if you do not stop them first. I call the plan we wrote on the wall in marker. Nets, H-stakes, door, shield, ear lines, slugs. Only if a spine rise happens. Mason pulls in rhythm. Riley keeps bait rock lobs light and steady so heads turn on a cadence we can read. June controls light and then water and then gloves like a metronome. I take the first ear line, then the second, and then the third after a 4 count while the jaw hinge opens. 3 shots, 3 bodies quiet. I log it while Mason and Riley reset and June throws fresh gloves at me without me asking. You run drills until this becomes what your body does all by itself, while your brain does math. The outer crowd thins after that run. The fast ones slice along the mesh and lose steam against the pallet curve. A few ordinary infected fall and do not rise. We let them be until the wedge clears and then do the drag routine. The drag routine is what saves you from infection, and saves your base from stink, and saves your mind from imagining you did not do what you just did. Hook, pull, knee set, shuffle, bleach, gloves off, new gloves on, log time, reset. I say the steps in my head. It keeps the hands honest. At midnight, the van in the ditch coughs once and dies a final death. The night stays in the pocket of quiet that good nights find. I lift the radio and listen to air. Nothing. I write no broadcast on the board and put a line through yesterday's note for the map tile. The man and the child did what I asked. They took water and did not chase entry. That is the best outcome. That is how a rule becomes a habit outside your fence. Maybe, later, if they keep their luck, we can post a second rule to them about color and about leaving no signs. Not now. We change watch. Riley takes roof. Mason naps by the door. June alternates between the water log and a small medical inventory, and then sits with Burke. I lie down on the mat and close my eyes, and listen to the roof tick, and think about the gun shop for 5 full breaths, and then push the picture away. The airfield is the present. It has room to move and room to fix mistakes, without those mistakes chewing into walls you can touch with both hands. I wake to a tap at my boot. Mason points at the outer fence camera. 2 ordinary infected test the fence at the same spot again and again. It is the place where the rebar stake sits slightly loose from last month when I drove it after a rain. I stand, slide on boots, and go out in the dark with a hammer and a wedge. I do not take the rifle. That is a choice I make on purpose to keep noise low and hands careful. Mason keeps the inner door set. If I call, he pulls. I move in a crouch to the weak spot and drive the wedge with short, heavy strikes. The infected flinch at the sound and pull back. I drive the wedge until the stake rings. I tap the mesh with the back of the hammer so I know how it sings now. I go back inside and log. Stake tight, mesh pitch high. which will mean something to me tomorrow when I forget which steak I fixed. Dawn arrives low and pale. The airfield smells like wet dust and oil. I make coffee on the little stove and share it around in small tin cups. June reaches for hers with bandaged fingers and thanks me with a nod. Riley looks at her map and circles a star on the nest that emptied. Mason rolls his shoulders and stands on his toes to get the kinks out of the cable work. Burke eats and then checks the door, and then posts himself by the hinge and waits to be useful. I write the numbers for the night. Subsonic rounds fired, 14. Slugs used, 3. Nets dropped, 5. Doors cycled, 5. Hinges checked, 5. Gloves used, 24. Bleach poured, 1 gallon and a quarter. Water consumed by crew, 6 gallons. Dog water, 1 quart. Reserve batteries, 79%. Generator runtime, 20 minutes exactly. I step back and look at the board. It is a wall of simple numbers. It looks like a shop order sheet. It makes my head quiet. After breakfast, I tell Mason to ride with me to check the ditch van for salvage. We take the motorcycle with the sidecar and roll slow along the inside line until the access lane and then crest the little rise careful. The van sits nose up like a stranded fish. Both rear tires are buried. The doors hang open. We check for bodies first. None. We check for traps. None. I crawl under the rear and look for the cable spool. It is gone. The strap is still tied to the bumper, cut short. They took what mattered to them and ran. I pull the battery. It is dead, but I can salvage the clamps and the housing. Mason pulls a handful of fuses, a relay block and 2 rubber grommets. He grins at the grommets more than the fuses. He will use them on a door that rattles. He loves making rattles go silent. We ride back and stack the salvage in the workshop bins. I drill a small hole in the dead battery housing and mount it to a wall as a parts box. It makes me irrationally happy to put junk to use. It also makes the room feel like a place that can stay, not just a stop. The day slides into maintenance. June mixes her mildew wash and applies it to 1 crate bed with care. Riley cuts strips of cloth for vine ties and sets a stake line to support beans as they climb. Mason takes the rattly man door apart and installs one of the grommets and shows me the new sound. He is right to be proud. It is quiet. It will not thrum under wind. I make a note to scavenge more grommets when we pass a parts store again, if there are any left. I carry the radio gift to the bench and strip it for spares. The gain knob still has bite. The spring under the push-to-talk button is clean. The bracket will make a good angle plate to hold the Yagi pole next time I need to raise it. I tape the numbers on each part and log them. The donor radio sits empty and somehow satisfied. Around noon the heat pushes up and I call a short rest. We drink, eat a handful of nuts, and keep our eyes on shade. Burke flops in the coolest stripe and sighs. June checks his boot and says we can take it off for a while. He licks her wrist once and lays his head back down. Riley fletches 2 arrows and sands a notch. Mason spins the winch once more to hear the new sound. It purrs like a thing meant to live long enough to bore its owner. In the afternoon, I walk the far taxi line and mark 4 places where weeds raised the edge just a little. I cut them and throw the clumps into the ditch and tamp the dirt with my heel. I check the tie-down anchors near the runway and tighten 2 with a long bar. I check the small Yagi at the cache and rotate it 2 degrees west. I log the time. I aim to show the crew that everything is a system, not a pile. Near evening, the wind picks up from the north and cools the runway early. That can bring another small pulse. We set stations and keep posture easy. We will not go tense before there is cause. I run my hand along the edge of the engine stand shield until the cold grabs my palm. I try to imagine the number of times I will need it and do not like the picture. I make a note to cut a second shield from a scrap of plate and bolt it to another stand. Safety and redundancy. I add it to the fabrications list. The pulse comes small. 5 ordinary infected and 1 fast one. We do not drop nets. We do not slam the door. We manage with a single rock, 2 subsonic shots, and 1 slow pull of a door to make an angle appear. I write the count. June cleans the floor. Riley re-rolls the net. Mason checks his new pin and taps it with a knuckle. It sings the note he wants. I feel like the hangar itself nods. Not because it is a mind, because it is a thing with parts that are now in tune. Night falls with a moon that gives enough light to see the runway numbers from the door. I have never used those numbers for navigation. I use them now for training. I tell the crew to pick a number and then sight a backstop from that number and tell me where a shot would go if it missed. It is a boring little game. It teaches more than words. After midnight, quiet holds. I roll my shoulders and rub a line in my neck with my thumb and feel the old heat from a day years ago when I hauled a body too far alone. I do not chase that memory down. I keep my eyes on this place. Burke stands, drinks, and returns to the door. He fights a yawn and loses, and then licks his paw and goes back to work. He cannot pretend to be a machine. He is a dog. He tries anyway, and it makes me love him more than is smart. We wake to a sky stacked with thin clouds and a cool breeze that makes the hoop house flap tremble. June grins because this is good drying weather for herbs. Riley grins because this is good scent weather for snares. Mason grins because wind makes the door sing and he wants to hear if his work holds. I grin because all three have found a reason to like this morning. I boil water and pour 3 cups and scratch Burke's neck and set a saucer down for him with a little bit of milk worked into his water. He looks at me with that slow blink that means yes, this is correct. We do the numbers. Rounds spent are logged. Water level marked. Bleach restocked. I write 2 new lines on the board under rules. Nets before fire. No lights for strangers. I underline both. I add no bright colors under the rules for posted cards. I draw a small box next to it so I can check off when I rewrite the card for the road post. None of this is art. All of it is doctrine. The rest of the day slips into a steady tone. We cut scrap for the second shield and drill holes with a slow bit and oil. We press bushings into a door brace. We set a small line of nails along the crate edge so June can anchor fabric covers without fighting wind. We carry sun-warmed water to the washing station and clean racks and nets and gloves until the plastic squeaks clean. We log every task and note blade dulling and handle cracks and stitch failure. By sunset, we have built 3 small pieces and repaired 4, and the place feels lighter by degrees, the way a workshop does after good work. We eat a hot meal, deer meat, beans, squash, a slice of tomato, and a little of the chili powder that makes it all taste like a memory of normal. We do not make speeches. We speak like people who worked all day and do not need to prove anything. June says the mildew wash worked on the first crate. Riley says her snares caught nothing because the wind shifted and made the edges smell wrong. Mason says the winch has not squealed all day. I say the hinge cups show no hairlines and the door seals do not rattle. Burke yawns like a man at a bar and then snorts and puts his chin on my boot. It is the sound of enough. The last surge of this cycle comes 3 nights later, and it is the one that proves the system beyond a doubt. The wind flips from north to south at dusk. The nest to the north empty into the corridor. Riley marks it on the map and shows me with 2 arrows that meet. We set stations early and drink extra water and recoil the nets twice. June lays out twice the gloves and twice the bleach. Mason sits the winch like a man about to row a heavy boat. I stand at the port and lower my head until the sight picture takes over and the rest of the world goes quiet. At 8:30 the first wave hits. 10 ordinary, 3 fast, 1 heavy. Easy if you do not stumble. We do not. We ride that first push with 3 nets, 1 door, 5 subsonic shots, and 1 slug on a fast mover that tried to climb the door and got a foot on the edge. I take the slug shot low angle, through the chest plate where it has no plate, to knock it off balance. It falls. I finish with a subsonic head angle when the chin lifts. The door holds. The hinge cups look clean. Mason says nothing, but I can tell he is ready for the next thing. He is right. It comes. At 9:30, a second wave arrives with 5 heavies and a loose tail of ordinary infected. The heavies hit on different rhythms. One is fast with the left side. One is slow and patient. One drags a leg and fakes clumsiness. 2 hunt the doors with their hands like they learned it. I call the full plan. Nets drop in sequence. H-stakes take shins. Doors slam. Shields plant. Rocks toss. Ear lines open. 3 shots. then 2. I save 2 slugs for the end, but do not need them. The plan stretches but does not tear. I can smell that when it happens. I can smell when a plan is at the edge and holding anyway. We do the drag routine through the lull and mop. June replaces the gloves with fresh ones and opens a new box with a mark for the date. Riley re-rolls one net because a loop wore thin and stitches a new joint with cord. Mason tightens a pin with forearms that look like cable in the light. I watch his face for signs that he is going to lose his temper from strain. He does not. He has his work, and that is enough to hold him steady. Then the last push hits at around 11 p.m. with a combination that would have broken the gun shop. 4 heavies at once. 2 try the door. 1 tries the gap. 1 surprises us by climbing the pallet seam like a man does when he is sick of doors. The door team is muscle and noise. The gap runner is a javelin. The climber is a problem I did not account for enough. I call the change on the fly. Mason drops a net on the door pair, while Riley throws rocks at the climber to slow the arms. I slam the second shield into the pallet and get my shoulder under its weight. June kills all light for 3 seconds to make the crowd pause. Those 3 seconds are the rope I needed. The climber reaches for the top of the pallet and misses by an inch because the light trick jerked the eye in that direction and broke the rhythm. I drop the door on his shoulder and the shield wedges under his chest. The ear line opens. Shot. The gap runner stumbles over a hidden H-stake we set for exactly this sort of thing. The jaw hinge fumbles open. Shot. The door pair saw shields and doors and nets and did not find a hole. The ear lines came in sequence. Shot. Shot. I log it with tiny handwriting while June hoses the floor with a measured line, and Riley rolls the net and Mason rubs his hands and smiles in a way that shows his teeth to an empty room. Past midnight, the airfield goes quiet. The stars come out bright. The runway numbers glow like bones in old light. I do not say that aloud. I do not use language that feels like a story. I put the tools away. I put the numbers on the wall. Subsonic rounds, 23, slugs, 3, nets, 10, doors, 10, shields, 2, heavies, 9, ordinary, many, fence breaches, 0, hinge hairlines, 0, winch squeal, 0, generator runtime, 0. That last one makes me nod. Quiet matters more than courage. We sleep in short runs. We wake to a sky like water in a tin. We drink coffee and chew meat and list repairs. The list is not long. That is the gift. Riley wants to change a net line. June wants to wash the crate covers. Mason wants to grease a cup. I want to paint 2 hinge heads and bend a bracket. We do those things before noon, and then go check the road post for the card. The card is gone. The water bottle is empty. A little stack of smooth stones sits on the ground where the bag was. The small stack is a sign from old hikers that means, we passed and we thank you. It could be a trick. It could be a man trying to be art in a world that has no use for it. I choose to read it as gratitude and move on. I do not leave a second card. Not today. The airport is not growing. It is consolidating. We ride back and find Burke waiting in the shade like a sentinel new to his post. He stands when he sees us. He sniffs the air around the front tire. He noses my knee. We go inside and I write the line that matters on the board. Held with minimal fire. Crew of 4 is enough. Then I add a second line. Expect return of heavies in 2 days if wind flips. I draw a box to check when the wind flips and when it does not. I let numbers track what my gut wants to guess. I sit at the door and think about the old range again, and how I lectured adults about muzzle discipline like they were kids. I think about my past self, who thought rules were things you put on a website and forgot. I think about the day the mutants came through the second skin and made those rules into artifacts. I think about boats and dogs, and how a man can hold a line for months and then have to walk away because the world decides you do not get to stay. I do not feel shame anymore for leaving. I feel smart. That is the difference time gives you if you use it. The crew settles. June laughs at something Mason says that I do not hear. Riley hums a run of notes without realizing it, and then stops like she just touched a hot plate and smiles. Burke rolls onto his back and snorts. I write in the log that we will build a second shield, replace 1 net loop, add a second H-stake line to the climber seam, and paint the hinge heads with yellow paint for quick checks. I add no bright colors to the posted card rules. I add no ladders again even though it is already there. Some rules deserve to be written twice. Evening drifts in with a wind that plays around the door edges. The grommet mason installed keeps the rattle out. The door hums like a tuned string. It is the hum of a place ready to work tomorrow. I stretch my back, set my rifle on the hooks, and feel the straight weight of a day done the way a day should be done. No trophies, no drama. Just reset, check, log, breathe, sleep. We eat late because work pushed dinner. Deer meat fried in the pan with salt and a splash of oil. Beans warmed in the same pan. A slice of bread that June coaxed out of a mix so old it should not be bread and yet is. We do not toast. We do not clink cups. We nod and eat and say the smallest words we need. Burke gets a bite and takes it gentle and returns to his post. The light goes from the roof. The red lamps click on for a minute and then off. The board looms in the low light with its numbers and heavy dots. It looks the way a day should look when a crew survives on purpose. When I lie down, I think about the next 30 months without meaning to. I see the hangar ribs and the runway stripe and the trees at the edge, and a man and a boy somewhere on a road reading a card that says, "Follow rules," or "Keep walking." I think about Mara and Tarek on a roof in the old city, and wonder whether the wind treated them gently this year. I let that thought go because I cannot chase it. I think about the second shield, and the bracket, and the hinge cup, and the numbers I will write tomorrow morning. I think about Burke's paw, and June's boot advice, and Mason's cable rhythm, and Riley's map arrows. I think about the simple fact that, for once, I do not have to pretend to be the only one who knows what to do. The roof ticks, the breeze shifts, the dog snores. I do not reach for a word to name it. I pick up a pencil and add one last line to the wall. Airport machine works. Then I blow out the shielded candle and let the place do its quiet work while we sleep. Dawn again. The roof clicks. The windsock remnant moves. The numbers on the board glow faint. I wake, sit, and put on boots. Burke stands and stretches with his rear high and his front low, then sneezes and shakes his head. He is ready to take his lap. I pour water into a cup, add 8 drops of chlorine to the new gallon, and write the time on the lid. I put coffee in the pot and fire the little stove with a single match. I walk the inside with the clipboard. Battery bank at 78%. Solar array output pending morning sun. Generator 0. Water levels at the mark. Totes sealed. Mildew wash on crate number 3 shows no new spots. Door hinges painted heads intact. Winch spins with no rub. Nets coiled with new loop stitched. H-stake seam doubled at the climb point. Shield number 2 drilled and mounted. Gas for the motorcycle 1/2 full. 2 empty jerry cans to fill when we pass the forecourt pump that still gives a drip with a hand pull. All things the same. All things better by degrees. The crew wakes one by one. Mason stumbles to the water jug, drinks, and wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. June checks the hoop house and cracks the flap. Riley stands on the roof and breathes in and out 3 times, and then turns to me and gives a thumbs up. Burke makes a small circle and sits by the door and looks at me for the word. I give him the hand signal for walk with me. He falls into step and we circle the inner line. At the far corner, I stop and look down at the femur thick growth plate shard that stuck to the crack between slabs during the night. It is hard as a shovel spade. I pick it up with gloved fingers and drop it into a bucket for the burn can. I do not want shards like that becoming parts of a story later. I want them gone. The bucket makes a dull sound when it hits the floor. I stand, roll my shoulders, and look at the runway. It is long, straight, honest. The hangar ribs show through the dust like an old spine that still carries weight. The crew moves in the right ways without me pointing. Burke breathes and waits for the word. The airport machine hums at idle. I write the day's first line on the wall, workable. We will keep it that way. We will hold this field with nets and doors and shields and rounds counted and numbers logged. We will help through gaps and not open doors to strangers. We will live by rules we can write in marker and teach with hands. The world is not kind, and it is not going to make room. We make the room, we keep it. We share water and maps and not much else. We survive on purpose. That is the plan. That is the work. That is the end of it, and the start of every day. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the stories alive. For now, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and stay alive. Jack's Nightmares, signing off. Until next time, survivor.